Hello, this is Guava Moment, and it's good to be back doing solution videos for SpaceChem. So something I always wondered, with these reactors you can turn literally anything into literally anything else. I always wondered what would make you the most money by doing that. My gut instinct is that there's two different solutions you could try. You could turn something heavy but cheap like lead into something light and expensive like, I don't know, beryllium. Like one day helium is going to be expensive, but like you could get a lot of berylliums out of an atom of lead. But it turns out no one submitted anything like that. Everyone did my second idea for this, which is to turn something light and cheap into something very heavy and expensive like platinum or plutonium or something. So let's just go through the 15 submissions and I'll show you how to make money with SpaceChem. We're going to start with Mr. Blarney, who turns salt into barium. And this is actually really quite simple. It's 2 salts, make 1 barium. Very simple reactor. Now Mr. Blarney wins the award for choosing the cheapest input for sodium chloride. He also made the cheapest output. Barium is not really that expensive. This ends up at something like $3.8 per cycle if we assume that each input is 1 mole of salt and each output is 1 mole of barium. So this, for Mr. Blarney, makes $3.80 per cycle. We can do better than this. Jackie Chad decides to turn ammonia into rhodium. Now ammonia was the second cheapest input anyone used, and all you need to know about rhodium is that it's about as expensive as platinum. So it's pretty expensive. So what Jackie Chad does is feed amino radical, or lop off 1 hydrogen from the ammonia to feed amino radicals to this reactor, which just fuses them together into rhodium. That 1 hydrogen gets fused together 45 times, eventually making another rhodium, and then this final reactor just kind of composites together to the output. Okay, so that's pretty good for Jackie Chad. Runs at input speed. However, rhodium, while expensive, isn't really all that expensive. This makes him about $297 per cycle for Jackie Chad, netting him 14th place. Gwen decides to turn vanadium into thulium, and this is a very simple reaction. 3 vanadiums make 1 thulium. Now for this reaction, thulium really isn't all that expensive. It's about half the cost of platinum, half the cost of rhodium, and the input cost of vanadium itself is not insignificant. However, with all things said and done, this ends up making Gwen about $380 per cycle for this pretty simple reactor. Blue-eyed Drat turns oxygen into rhodium, another rhodium. Rhodium seems to be a popular thing. Now for this one, let's fuse oxygen together a bunch of times to make zirconium. The zirconium, 8 of them get sent down, 1 will eventually get sent up top and split into calcium. These calciums, once they come eventually, well, the calciums will get split into 2 neons, and then those neons will get split into borons. And then those borons meet up with those original zirconiums, and they all get fused together into rhodium. So very simple reactor. Now this one ends up making Blue-eyed Drat about $475 per cycle. It's starting to get an improvement over the solution where we saw ammonia into rhodium, kind of just because oxygen has more atomic mass than ammonia, because ammonia is a nitrogen at 7 and 3 hydrogens equals 10 atomic units. This one makes 8, or this was 2 8s. That makes 16, a little bit heavier, gets up to rhodium faster. So that's why Blue-eyed Drat gets 12th place. JBZ Darkid turns tellurium into platinum. And this is a rather simple reaction. Tellurium splits into iron, and 3 irons make a platinum. Now, while this ends up at a cost of about or a profit of $1,700 per cycle, roughly, this puts JBZ Darkid in 11th place. This is the best of all of the people who made platinum or rhodium. And now, why is that this solution the best out of that subset? It seems to be that the people that are choosing their inputs to be heavy seem to be doing well. In this case, tellurium, with element 52, certainly weighs more than an oxygen or an ammonia. And similarly, in almost all of the solutions, the actual cost of your input is completely negligible. So it looks like the winning solution will have to try to make something heavy and expensive, and have your input be something also heavy but cheap. So let's see if this pattern holds up, and we'll go on to the next solutions. Cheetah comes in 10th place with about $1,900 per cycle by turning chlorine into lutetium. Now this is an interesting solution. Let's look at this. This is a little bit complicated, so let's... chlorine gets split off, oxygen is sent out into this reactor. These fluorines that remain kind of get fused into this krypton, now xenon. And then it just fuses straight up. One chlorine makes lutetium. This next chlorine will complete the cycle, so let's get a bunch of fluorines fused into this. As you'll see here. And there's your lutetium. The oxygens. This is an interesting story. Starting over. Okay, let's fuse the oxygen together into barium, and then split that into nickel, and then split that into silicon, and then nitrogen, okay. And then oxygens just get fused into that nitrogen, and eventually become, lutetium. So if we watch this go, this stuff down here is a kind of I call this the pseudo-Dudian tactic. It's a nitrogen stick. By splitting these, you'll always get nitrogen out, and then by fusing enough oxygen into the nitrogen, you'll add up to 71 lutetium. This is actually kind of pretty clever. And then, of course, the final reactor just combines the two lutetiums into a final output. So, I mean, this was pretty clever. Lutetium is about twice the cost of platinum by weight. So I guess it's an okay choice for a product, but ooh, look at this. There's a clog in the pipes. This does not run at input speed. That means this lutetium is being made pretty slowly, and that's why Cheetah gets only 10th place, $1,900 per cycle. Leylite also chooses to make lutetium. This time he uses hydrobromic acid. That should read bromic, I should fix that, but I won't. Hydrobromic acid into lutetium is pretty simple. Fuse one together, and then fuse a bromine into a krypton. And then drop the hydrogen out. This hydrogen gets fused together 71 times to make lutetium. This guy down here, I mean, this is obviously a 14 count flip-flop. I'm sure you've seen them before. It probably isn't even the first 14 count flip-flop you've seen today. And just hold on. Oh yeah, much better. So yeah, let's fuse a bunch of hydrogen into lutetium, and then this also serves as the combined reactor to make the one output. So for Leylite, this comes at 9th place and $3,000. That's a lot more than Cheetah's $1,900 for making lutetium. That's partly because the input pipe is clear of backups. 2 chlorines weigh 34, bromine and hydrogen weigh 36. So these two are very similar, I guess, potential solutions, but this one ends up being a lot faster, or ends up making more profit because it runs faster and doesn't have a clog at the input. It runs at input speed. Okay, moving on. Juggernaut 93 starts us off into our interesting section by making plutonio out of something called argento. And this is a very simple reactor. 2 argentos make 1 plutonio, which of course is Italian for plutonium. Now, plutonium, very expensive. You can find many links on the internet claiming $4,000 per gram. However, there was a competitor, Lawalitsme, who provided a link to something that looks very technical, and these guys seem to know what they're doing. That cost might be for plutonium dioxide, which is the common method of transporting plutonium, I guess. Pure refined plutonium metal is about $10,990 per gram. That means Juggernaut 93 at 8th place makes $130,000 per cycle with this solution. So at this point, our outputs are so expensive, really, we could use silver. The cost of silver is insignificant to this whole solution. Wow, the Italian one doesn't... I've never run SpaceChem in a different language. It doesn't fit nicely into these boxes. Well, let's see some more plutonium solutions, see if we can get this even more profitable. I'm actually going to skip over the 7th place solution, and I'll get back to it, but I'll show you the 6th place solution right now from GG Gall. This is powellite. It's the mineral you mine if you want to eventually generate molybdenum metal. What Jijigol does is take powellite and make a really neat reactor. Well, let's fuse the calcium and oxygen into the molybdenum, make ytterbium and oxygen, and then fuse all of that together, and it makes a plutonium. Now this is a really cool reactor just to watch. I love this little axe thing, and this looks really neat. Now this ends up at about $270,000 per cycle. The reason this one works a lot better is that if you completely fuse one powellite together, you get one plutonium. In the previous solution, it required 2 silvers to make 1 plutonium, so this essentially doubles the profit from Jijigol by having something that adds up. All of the elements here add up to 94, which makes plutonium. So I think that's really neat. Let's try another plutonium. Lawalit's me turns silver phosphate into plutonium, and oh boy, this is a reactor. Okay, it starts off by, fusing a bunch of stuff together here. Makes this and drops some silver down here. If we follow this top one, it gets fused a bit. Platinum and drops some oxygens. Oh man, okay. And then all of these fragments bonded together, fused together into plutonium. We go back and see what happens with the silvers. As we saw before, 2 silvers make 1 plutonium. And then this final reactor just bonds them together and outputs plutonium. So this one, it runs at input speed, but each input creates 2 plutoniums. This means Lawalit's me makes twice the money of Jijigol at about $540,000 per cycle, and that gets him 5th place. So what's the next logical step to go from here? Why, we would get Tough Thought's solution, who turns lead-2 arsenate into plutonium. This one's a little bit complicated, as we'll see. Take this giant beast of a molecule, split off 1 oxygen into a beryllium, so the top reactor gets this oxygen, arsenic, oxygen, and oxygen, arsenic, beryllium. Fuse all of those together, and it makes a plutonium for this top row. Okay. This bottom stuff this is a little bit complicated, but if you do the math, 1 lead, 1 oxygen, and 1 beryllium adds it to a plutonium. So that's what this reactor is doing. It's getting all its berylliums together, all its leads, oxygens, fusing them all together as need be into plutonium. And then, of course, the final reactor, in a very stylish way, I must say, gets all of them together and outputs them into the one pipe. Now, Tough Thought ends up at 4th place with this solution, at about $1.1 million in profit per cycle, and that's because 1 lead-2 arsenate molecule ends up making 4 plutoniums. Now that is really cool. So Tough Thought, 4th place, because his output was very, very expensive, and because his input made a whole lot of output, because his input was very, very heavy. So that seems to be a winning formula. Let's go forth and see more solutions here. I'm going to go back and show off the 7th place solution now from Waypoint. He turned silicon dioxide, sand, into jadeite. Let's see how he does that first. First by taking silicon dioxide and removing 1 bond from it. In this reactor, this gets complicated. Let's get 2 of these. Okay, drop that off. He's going to make a silicon oxygen stick and output that. Then blue is coming. It's binding this together. It's going to get its aluminum and sodium from somewhere. Yep, there's a sodium, there's an aluminum, and then here it creates the unit cell for jadeite. Now where to get these? From this here, this SiO stick, does kind of a big complicated song and dance to make your sodium and aluminum. There's aluminum. This generates a bit of waste though, silicon, beryllium, fuse all that together to make a calcium. Okay. This calcium obviously gets fused together a bunch of times, 3 times, to make neodymium. There it goes. There it is. And then let's split all that a bunch to make phosphorus sticks. Okay. Yeah, phosphorus sticks, because you can split phosphorus sticks and fuse the nitrogens and get some oxygens and stuff, and you can remake silicon oxygen sticks. which are then reintroduced into this stream. Okay, so this was the most complicated solution. Someone submitted 243 symbols. That's a lot. Now, jadeite, as a precious mineral, the cost of it is just astronomical. It's 10 times the cost of plutonium. But this is 7th place and worse off than most of those plutonium solutions because of this. It does not run at input speed. Even remaking some silicon dioxide and introducing that back into the system, it just doesn't make up for the fact that there's a bunch of time wasted sitting here not building things. So this, for Waypoint, gets him 7th place at about $240,000 per cycle. This is the 3rd place solution by Binky. This is kind of an interesting one. He's turning propionaldehyde into curium. Now the reaction is actually kind of simple. It's 2 or 3 propionaldehydes fused together make 1 curium. A couple interesting things to say about this solution. Binky used the most expensive input out of anyone. Propionaldehyde is by far the most expensive thing that anyone chose to input. Curium is also the most expensive output that anyone chose. Curium goes for about $160 per microgram, according to his research, which makes it the most expensive thing that anyone showed me. A couple interesting things to say. What is propionaldehyde? Well, unless you're a chemist, I don't think it has much interest. It's used as a precursor to make a bunch of other chemicals. But one interesting thing is that it has been detected out in interstellar space, so it kind of just forms naturally in molecular clouds. Curium, that's another interesting element. It's highly radioactive. The half-lives of this range from about 1 million years to a month, depending on the reaction. This is very simple. This is neat. This is one of the things that I wanted to see when people were submitting. I wanted to see new and interesting ideas. Like, I had never heard of propionaldehyde before. I didn't know much about curium before. This is interesting. And that gets Binky 3rd place at about 570 million per cycle. It does not run at input speed though. That, as we have seen, that is kind of a killer. So even though Binky is making the most expensive thing, he's not making it fast enough or very efficiently. That's why he gets 3rd place. Okay, moving on. Rex Kicks comes in with my favorite submission. It's 2nd place. It's 7 symbols. Rex Kick, thank you. As I was sitting here recreating those 5-reactor 240 plus symbol nightmares, all I was thinking of, wow, why couldn't more people be like you and be awesome? And turn indium into californium. This is obviously the simple reaction. 2 indiums, 1 californium. Now californium is also very, very expensive at around $60 per microgram. So cheaper than curium, but still incredibly expensive, way more expensive than plutonium. Now this reactor obviously runs at input speed. Every 2 inputs make 1 californium, and that makes Rex Kick $750 million per cycle. So if we saw in the plutonium challenges, if we just stuck with making plutonium outputs, the best way to do it is to make your input very heavy. So with 2 inputs needed to make 1 californium, how do we do better than this? Making the inputs heavier. As we will see in our number 1 solution, as we will see in Zamyla's solution, who turns thallium-1 selenide into californium. Now this thallium is a very heavy element, element 81, selenium's not too shabby either, 34. So all of these add up. If you split off, let's see what he's doing here. He splits off the selenium to make chlorine, fuses all this together, fuses the chlorine and the tellurium to make californium. This tellurium gets dropped, so obviously this next reactor combines all of that together, tellurium and chlorine, to make californium, bond these together, and output. So 1 input of thallium-1 selenide makes 2 californiums. That means Zamyla gets the number 1 solution at $3 billion per cycle. Just as a reminder, the 15th place solution was $3 per cycle. I don't know if I've ever seen a challenge where there was a factor of 1 billion difference between the winner and the last place. But congratulations, Zamyla, and congratulations to all of our contestants. I had a great time doing this again. But One thing I do want to point out is that the best solution still isn't here. Knowing now that Curium might be the most expensive thing anyone could make, what can we choose as our input that can add up to a Curium better than propionaldehyde will? That would be the #1 solution, and I'd be interested to see what that is. But I'd like to thank you all for watching this video, and for SpaceChem in general. It's a great game, and it's good to be doing solution videos once again. Okay, I've been Guava Moment. Take care. And if you're wondering what you can use Curium and Californium for, well, since these elements are highly radioactive, a lump of metal will, through radioactive decay, become very hot. And you can attach that to a heat engine and create electricity in a radioisotope thermoelectric generator, or RTG. RTGs are used on things like satellites or space probes or space rovers, applications where you need like a watt to somewhere 100 watts, but you obviously can't refuel them and want them to last for as long as possible. So that's a possible use for these things. Californium is also used in the nuclear reactor industry. It's a source of neutrons, and a bunch of other scientific purposes for that. So there you go.